So I have been predicting for the longest time that the winner of this contest is going to be Kemi Badnoch. She is going to win this contest. And we've still got another week to go, roughly. By this time next week, I think we'll be 3-4 days out, maybe, from the voting itself to take place. But I've said it before, she's going to win. What I was predicting as well was that there was now going to be this realization by a lot of conservative commentators, by a lot of people who were like really pro-Jerick or generic, as his own party calls him. They've now got to come to terms that they're going to elect, Badnoch, and guess what? She's going to be an absolute disaster for the party. She's going to be, to quote Blackadder, a 10-story crisis. And this is going to be really bad for the party, because the direction that she's going to push the party in, the way that she's going to act, the outburst that we are going to see not only in Parliament, in maybe during question time, in TV studios. And then, of course, Conservative MPs are going to have to try and defend that. And they are going to get very tired very quickly, just as they got tired very quickly of Boris Johnson. So make no mistake, we will be doing this again in a year, maybe 2 years' time, this whole leadership election song and dance. But make no mistake, people like, as we're about to now, to, Daniel Hannan on the Conservative Home, so you're in for a good time, and now realizing that this is who's going to be leading their party for the next year, and all of a sudden, they've now going to appear pro-Badnoch. If they don't, well, then maybe they might lose their access. So we've got now a justification for, well, I voted for Rob to win, but Kemi, well, she's gonna win it now. But here's my terrible prediction that she might fall into. So there are a lot of these appearing right now on many of the conservative news sites as well. But again, I say I predicted this would happen. So again, I do get my predictions right. So as always, thank you very much for all those people who do help and support the channel. Like I say, down below, there's the Patreon page, the Buy Me Coffee link, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, the Pony Club down below as well. And of course, as well, you can always use the super thank you button that YouTube has as well. So let's crack on then into this, coming from Conservative Home, and of course, Daniel Hannan. Comedy gold awaits us now. So he says, okay, I'm calling it. Kemi Badnoch is going to win. And I write this as a Robert Jerick voter. Late to the party there, Dan. I have been calling this even before the contest was announced. But, there you go. So how do I know, he says? Well, for 21 years, I had to get reselected by our activists as a Euro candidate. I may not know much about much, but I do reckon that I have an insight into how our members think. And yes, unless I have completely lost my touch, Kemi will not just win, but win big. A YouGov poll now shows her at least 52 to 48 leads, and of course now narrowing. But I'm going to stick my neck out and say that the eventual result will be closer to the two in one now to favour her. Feel free to obviously bookmark this article and have a good laugh in 2 weeks' time if I am wrong. None of this affects his vote, though. So, yeah, Kemi Badnoch is going to win this contest outright. You look at the membership polls on Conservative Home, and remember, the membership polls on Conservative Home have been so accurate in predicting who is going to be the next leader of the Conservative Party, eerily so. And those comments that Kemi Badnoch made about maternity leave, arresting like 5,000 civil servants, went down horribly with like the rest of the British voting public, But to the Conservative membership, that was ambrosia that they wanted to hear for years. So they lapped it up. So she is going to win. She knew who she was playing for on that one. So let's continue. So Rob has a fierce hunger that opposition leaders need. Well, he doesn't really tend to show it. He reminds me very much of a cardboard cutout. He has at least thought more deeply than any other Conservative MP about how to fix our immigration system, and he deserves much more credit than he has now for resigning over that issue. Really, he resigned over that issue because he wasn't going to get his way, or at least the right wasn't going to get their way, because Sunak knew that they couldn't be too extreme because the Lords had continuously kept on denying this a really extreme, anti-immigration bill that the party wanted to pass. And he knew that it would never pass through the Lords at all, as it didn't. The Rwanda plan failed essentially on a very epic scale, despite how they tried to deny that it wasn't a failure, or that it was this rip roaring success, and that it was actually wasn't a massive colossal waste of money. But there you go. So back to this. Regular Conservative home readers will obviously recall that 6 weeks ago, I did suggest now a series of party reforms to be undertaken immediately by the new leader of the opposition, including the appointment of Jacob Rees-Mogg as party chairman. Rob had obviously been thinking along similar lines. Why on earth would you make Jacob Rees-Mogg party chairman? Like, that is one of the most important jobs in a political party, and you're going to give it to Jacob Rees-Mogg. What abilities has Jacob Rees-Mogg actually shown that he would make a good party chairman? Anyway, so although, of course, the polls for voters at large are now mixed, on balance, they do show at least Rob doing better against Starmer, especially amongst Reform voters. This matters because it was the Reform surge, not any swing to the Lib Dems, that put us so many Lib Dems now in the House of Commons. Their votes remained more or less where it was, but they benefited from a divided right. Again, not true. It wasn't the divided right vote that won. You still lost a lot of votes. The Lib Dem vote increased in a lot of these areas, and then you got, well, you don't understand. We'd have won if the right wing vote wasn't divided. Again, Michael Gove's think tank, Beyond Blue, Breaking Blue, that was it. Pretty much stated this. No, they lost a lot of seats to Lib Dems because a lot of Conservatives went and switched their votes to the Lib Dems. It wasn't this. The right wing vote had been divided. Again, Daniel Hannan getting it wrong, just showing you that they're going to be in the political wilderness for some time, but that's a good thing. So back to this. Not that, of course, I expect any of this now to convince our members. They like Kimmy's energy and, of course, anti-wokery, and they like the idea of Labour MPs who've never had a female or ethnic minority leader grinding their teeth in frustration. I don't disagree that we have two fine candidates. I just happen to think that there is one likelier now to win. Yeah, because guess what? That is exactly why they want her. They want her for that anti-wokery stuff. That's why they want her. Anyway, he continues, whoever, of course, emerges now as a successor will face now a very serious problem. How do you, of course, sell free market politics to an electorate that, although dislikes the disease of excessive statism, recoils in alarm from the only now possible cure, namely, of course, lower spending? Well, maybe then, fundamentally, it's time to maybe change your ideas, that this free market fundamentalism, which Daniel Hannan has been probably one of the biggest advocates for, maybe it's time to admit that those days are over. Maybe they need to search for new policies, maybe change their ideas. But of course, that's not going to happen because, I keep on saying it, big problem with the Conservative Party. They are so ideologically aligned, so ideologically fixed, regardless of anything that happens outside that, it's not the ideology that's the problem, it's something else. Like there, he blamed the voters. He blamed the voters for recoiling in fear. The electorate that dislikes it. Maybe it's the ideology that they don't like. You know, just an idea there. Anyway, so each of course the finalists has made now their own issue. It has been, of course, immigration for Rob and identity politics for Kemi. But within a year or two, let alone by the next election, the only thing that will matter will be restoring the growth now in the aftermath of Labour's calamitous changes to our tax system and labour laws. Oh, they really do not like this new labour law that Labour's just that Labour's been passing. Even Nigel Farage deigned to turn up and vote against it. You know, this new law that gives more rights to workers in a generation than any previous government has given. Oh, can't have that. Can't have workers having more rights now, can we, Dan? I mean, Christ, it even got Nigel Farage to turn up and vote against it. And of course, here, we run into a problem. Voters feel that nothing much works in Britain. They resent the fact that taxes keep rising without any consumer improvement now in public services. These sentiments now contribute to the Conservative defeat in July. Not really. A lot of people do say, you know, we do have currently the highest tax burden since the Second World War. That is true. But we are reaching a point where you have to now look at people who do earn a lot more money and how much they are being taxed, because they aren't being taxed quite a lot because, again, of Dan's policy of, well, if you tax these people, how on earth can their wealth trickle down, you know? And of course, he complains about, oh, well, you know, these public services are improving. Well, we've had 14 years of a very, very bare-boned, you know, public services cuts, just cut after cut after cut after cut by a, you know, Conservative Party, and this is the state that they have ended up in. A lot of people are predicting this for years, and guess what? Here we are. So, and yet now they also evidently feel, as Ralph Waldo Emerson, that the foolish constituency is the hobgoblin of little minds. According to every measure of public opinion, voters want even higher public spending and now further nationalizations, including of Ticketmaster. Again, this, of course, doesn't make any sense to the mind of Daniel Hannan. How on earth does the public want higher public spending and, you know, nationalization? You know, how could they want nationalization? Oh no. Anyway, because of course it is in human nature now to anchor to the status quo. The status quo, though, why now we now seeing increasing calls for nationalization? You know, why are we seeing that? Any proposal, of course, to return the size now of a state closer to where it was in February of 2020 before lockdowns will be portrayed and be widely decried as a return now to a Dickensian sweatshop economy. I like it, before the 2020 lockdowns. Bear in mind, Dan doesn't, of course, mention that the civil service had to get larger before the 2020 because of Brexit. He will never, ever admit, of course, because he's one of, you know, Brexit is the precious beast to someone like Daniel Hannan. He will never, ever admit that the civil service had to increase because they now had to take on more jobs because we left the EU, because they had to now perform more functions. And, of course, because we now have more regulatory bodies than before, they didn't fund these bodies properly. They didn't, you know, employ enough civil servants as maybe they should do. You know, this has caused other problems. We talked very recently about the border problem that was going to be operating down in Kent very recently. That was a classic example of conservatism Brexit bluster. True, of course, there may be other ways to boost growth. Of course, this GDP increases, the state can, of course, reduce the proportionate, if not in absolute terms. The more there is more or less what now happened under Margaret Thatcher, when, contrary to almost universal belief, the public spending rose every year, albeit now more slowly than the private sector. The trouble is here that even if this now involves unpopular choices, such as now abandoning Labour's new workers' rights, again, good luck with that. Deregulating childcare, building airports, and above all, dropping the net zero target. Again, good luck with that. We are now stuck in a doom loop. So Daniel Hannan has not stopped here to think at all. If he thinks they're now caught in this doom loop of these policies that they want to get rid of, but voters aren't going to vote for them because they don't like those policies. But again, as we've said, ideology to Daniel Hannan, those policies he wants to do, the only thing that can save them. Nothing out of that ideological scope that he prescribes as this free market fundamentalism will work, because it's only his free market fundamentalism will, of course, work. Remember, Brexit, according to Daniel Hannan, instant success. The second we leave the EU, it'll be honey, roses, and everything else. But of course, like Daniel Hannan, blames COVID, blames lockdown, more for anything. And of course, we've said it before on this channel. COVID, quite frankly, was probably the best thing to happen for the Brexiteers, because they can blame just so much of, or at least, shall we say, hide a lot of the Brexit damage under the guise of COVID and lockdowns. And again, the further we get away from that, the worse. The less that argument will carry on, because, well, what do you do? There hasn't been any, COVID for a while. How do you explain, the state of the economy? Anyway, so voters, of course, want more growth, but oppose all policies needed to achieve it. Well, maybe then you need to look at new policies, but of course he's not. Their attitude will, of course, finish the present administration just as surely as it finished the last. But can the Tories actually ensure that they are the beneficiaries? Probably not. Probably not at all. We don't know what's going to happen between now and, of course, the next election. It's still too early to call. Way too early to call. But in the late 1970s, when we are, of course, in a very similar predicament, a great deal now of the heavy lifting was done not by the Conservative Party, but by the wider Conservative movement, by business organisations, think tanks, columnists, and others who understood that we needed now a smaller state who could actually make the argument more easily than our MPs could. Again, we've never been a small state. Since the Second World War, we've never been this small state. But what does that actually mean? What does that actually entail? What should the state, of course, no longer do? And you get that by what Daniel Hannan said there, abandoning the new workers' rights, deregulating childcare, dropping net zero. There's a ton of stuff that is sort of a catch-all term, but it's also the wink wink nudge nudge of, well, maybe we'll make the NHS private, because after all, smaller state means, why should the state provide universal healthcare? But back to this. But even, of course, with that advantage, it took the winter of discontent to actually convince people that we could not spend our way out of trouble. I happen to think that we are in for something similar before the next election, but the opposition leader needs to now be prepared for either way. She will need to now position her party as the beneficiary of the Labour unpopularity without scaring voters away by sounding too harsh. At the same time, without closing off the option for a serious retrenchment after the election. And yeah, Kimmy Badenoch's not going to be able to do that. She's not politically astute to be able to do that. Her policies are going to be insanely right wing. Like I say, they do not understand that they are not going to come back after at the next election. They said exactly the same and said constantly like this after 1997, and they weren't back for some time either. So they are going to go away, but they will come back eventually. But they are going to be like this in this doom loop, as Daniel Hannan said, and they've elected Kimmy Badenoch now, but who will they elect next after that? Will it be Robert Jerrick, who will just be as bad? Will they elect someone else who is just as bad? it will be some time before any sense or normality is ever returned. And maybe by that point, they won't be the main party of opposition. Maybe it will be, you know, it will be the Lib Dems who are the main party of opposition by that point. Yeah. Anyway, so so yeah, that's Daniel Hannan. Still, as I said many times, just going to show you what I keep on saying about them being so ideologically aligned that he can't even understand. But why won't voters vote for the stuff that I want to do? Mystery, isn't it? Mystery. But that's because the UK is changing fundamentally. Social attitudes changing massively as well. The voting bloc that the Conservatives used to rely on getting ever smaller and now having to compete against reform. Fundamentally, there has been a monumental change in the British voting public, and the Conservatives just have not realised that is the case. So until they actually start to tackle that issue seriously, and then to actually attract that new sort of set of voters, they will have to fundamentally change how they look at their issues, then their policies, and that will mean an abandoning of free market policies, free market fundamentalism. And oh boy, would Daniel Hannan throw his toys out of the pram if that starts to happen. So maybe one day we'll be reading that, but that'll be interesting. But anyway, let me know what you think down below, and of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.